Okay, this is going to be a little bit longer of a video. We're going to call it the grand finale of about 15 years of informational studies and the culmination of everything that I've kind of come to the conclusion of. And the conclusion is that it's inconclusive, but the good news is that we've got a good roadmap. So that's the fun part. So I'm going to want, organizations like 4chan, Reddit, Anonymous, probably too, since they're a global network that can do information gathering, and other what you call grassroots groups that can actually network and work together on pulling information out of thin air, basically. We want you guys to probably jump in on this and figure out what this is about. It's something that's really interesting. So a long time ago, when I was in jail, I was sitting there. I was thinking that there's the Trinity and a lot of things. There's like the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, and a lot of other trinities out there. Like you look at the primary and secondary colors, they come in packs of 3, right? You got, was it red, blue, and yellow, and then you've got your purple, orange, and green, right? So for your primary and secondary, so those both come in Trinity. So a lot of things come in 3s, and so I was thinking like, well, we've got a Doppler effect for sound and light, and so I figured that there's probably, since they're both energy waves, the gravity's an energy wave too. From what we understand, we've measured it in waves. So I assume that there's probably a Doppler effect in gravity as well. We just can't measure that yet. That's something that I kind of came up with. I came up with that 12 years ago in jail. So that was kind of an interesting concept. And so we've got, this is where it gets interesting. We've got 7 continents. There's major artifacts as far as giant monuments on every continent. But some of the things is that there's obelisks that were not completely pulled out of the ground. And so we don't know if those are incomplete projects where a marker was never put in its proper location. In other words, a project wasn't finished. A point on the map was not finished potentially. So that's something to take in consideration. I suspect that the Egyptians moved that specific stone that they used for the three pyramids from the location where it was at, specifically because of its mass and its weight for its volume. And the reason I say that is because the 3 pyramids of Giza are all separated at perfect distance from one another, and according to their size and their shape is kind of like the volume and the mass of the 3 stars of Orion's belt. And so that's where things get interesting, because you start looking at the constellations, and some of them, they just, for what they're marked out to be, they kind of match as far as the star structure goes. But it's like, why did they choose that character, that shape, the creature that they picked, or the caricature like Orion, right? Okay, so Orion was an archer. Well, this is where things get interesting. You look at Egypt and its geographical location on the planet, and Orion's belt is the pyramids of Giza. There's 3 of them. They match the shape and size of the 3 stars in Orion's belt. Those were our ancestors telling us that those 3 stars are the same size and shape of the pyramids. There, it's a map. These ancient sites, these ancient markers that we have on Earth, is a reflection of the stars in the sky that we see. And what they're telling us is according to the location of the ancient civilizations that we have 13 families on this planet, 13 species that came from outer space. They left us a map. And the constellations are an ancient way to explain through storytelling, like the Native Americans used. They traditionally did storytelling to pass information on. Those 3 markers there, we've got 3 points on the map that are volumetrically accurate according to what we see in the sky. So we can take the Earth and we can stretch it out and expand it outward according to what we see in the sky, and we can reflect what we have on the Earth into the sky as our sky map. So you look at Orion's belt, and you look at Orion, well, this is where it gets really interesting, because now we have something that we have 2 points, and this is why we need everyone on the Earth to look at this, because I don't know all of the mythology on the planet as far as different cultures go, and so this is what's going to be hidden in each culture, and also in each Bible, kind of like as above, so below. I was talking about how there's potentially different universes as we get down to a point where we're looking at subatomic levels of quarks and neutrinos. Our physics model starts to break down and doesn't really work under those circumstances. And I hypothesize that is the what's the word? It's the what I would call the event horizon of going into a new universe. The same way where we can't technically go past the speed of light. Technically, I don't know if we've actually broken that apart into where it no longer is true. I haven't really looked at recent physics when it comes down to stuff like that, so I don't know if that's our breaking point, if we have models that state that we can break the speed of light at this point. Anyways, as we go towards the speed of light, like black holes, right? They absorb light, which means that they can pull light in faster than it can come out, which means the gravitational pull is heavier than light. So that's kind of like, you look at the speed of light, that's kind of like what you would call along the event horizon of where once we break that point, we might be going into what you would call a larger outer universe, a different dimension that we're not in. So you kind of look at the bubble of our physics in between the speed of light and then down to the subatomic level with quarks and neutrinos. And when physics starts breaking down, you can tell that's like our maximum size and our minimum size of the dimension that we live in, or the universe, or whatever you want to call it. And so when I get back to that, this is where things get interesting. So we've got the 3 stars on Orion's belt. Those are three points on the map. And so people say it's a giant battery, or they use it to, I think, pull water from the Nile, or is like a water source because of the bottom of the basement, or a tomb, or something else. It could have had multiple purposes, but I think its main purpose was to essentially let us know, because they had hieroglyphics that showed like helicopters and spaceships and stuff like that, and I think a guy with a space helmet on too. And I went, wait a minute, what's going on here? And then I thought about it, and I'm going, those 3 stars in Orion's belt are the same shape and volume or mass as the representation of the 3 pyramids of Giza. And then I went, okay, that's Orion's belt, like, big deal. And then I look at Orion, I'm going, oh, he's shooting an arrow somewhere. Okay, he's shooting an arrow. And then I'm going, okay, well, Rome is right next door. And I'm looking at it, and I'm going, there's an old mythology, it was an ancient Roman archer test to see if you had good enough eyesight in the military. If you were able to, from at night, on a clear night, it's called the Pleiades cluster. If you were able to see a certain number of stars, that meant you had good enough eyesight at night, that during the day you would have a good enough eyesight to be an accurate long distance shot as an archer. And so that was one of their tests, is that they would pull people out at night, and they would line them up and say, how many stars do you see? How many stars do you see? And that's called the Pleiades cluster. Now, if you kind of look at, we can really only see with our eyes in 2 dimensions when it comes to the stars, because we don't get the actual depth of that. It's hard to see the distance, of stars. We can see brightness, but our planets in our solar system are just about as bright as some stars out there when it comes down to things. So it's really hard to see distance. But if you can imagine in a 3-dimensional model, you look at Orion pulling back his archer, his bow and his arrow, he's firing towards the Pleiades cluster, which is right over the Mediterranean. So what I'm trying to say is that what I'm looking at in between the constellations that were left for us and the worldwide monuments that we have, because we have pyramids all over the planet. We have pyramids in the Arctic. We have pyramids underwater. We have pyramids in China. We have all kinds of these we have a lot of different like Mayan, Aztec, Incan artifacts too. All of these large buildings that were built a long time ago, these temples, the Temple of the Sun and stuff like that. I think that's in South America, or it's Aztec, called Temple of the Sun. They all revolve around the constellations and also around star alignments and the time in which we revolve around the universe. What they're telling us is that each civilization came from a specific spot in the sky. And so what they did is they left us a star map of where we came from. And so this is it's profound. It's kind of got me a little uneasy right now just explaining it. But we can take the Earth and we should be able to expand that outward and look at the constellations. I don't know how the story unfolds when you look at the whole entire story, but I suspect that the constellations with the animals and the characters that are in it explain us. There's a story. There's a story being told with the monuments that were put on the planet versus the constellations in the sky of where we came from as human beings. That's a hypothesis, but at the same time, I put money on that bet. That's the question. The question is can we find out enough information to fill in the pieces of the puzzle and the gaps? Because through history, we've had wars where monuments have been destroyed. So are we going to be able to chart the plotted points on the map that are now gone? Because I don't know if there's any gone at all or not, or if some of them never got finished because of civilization difficulties. But obviously the Egyptians are very well known, and those are 3 points. They left us 3 points right next to each other at the correct distance and the correct mass for their size and their volume to represent those stars in Orion's belt. And it's not a coincidence they did that. And it's not a coincidence that Orion was an archer that was shooting an arrow towards the Pleiades cluster, and the Romans right over the Mediterranean in the Roman era used the Pleiades cluster to test their archers' eyesight. That is not a coincidence. Typically with situations, you need 3 points when it comes to coincidence, but I only have 2 between the Pleiades cluster and Orion's belt pointing the arrow at the Pleiades cluster. But I suspect that is literally a physical representation in the sky of what they have on the ground, and also what we have on the ground is a physical representation in the sky of what our constellations are meant for. So don't shit yourself when you think about this, because there's a lot of implications involved. If this is true, it's a hypothesis, right? But if this is true, it means that we have approximately 13 species of alien embedded into our genetics, and that our ancestors left us the clues of where we come from in their lore, maybe in the hieroglyphs, the story of the hieroglyphs, and also the pinpoint locations of the monuments that they left in each culture around the world, where we can expand that outward into the constellations. So if we start finding out that more of these,